again, everybody, with John Dodds. I'm Tom Pippins. Our producer is Jason Ruck, and welcome to another edition of the Marquette Hoops Basketball Show. We are brought to you by Moonlight Graham. Moonlight Graham Modern Dental Benefits, a proud sponsor of this fine program. And JD, we have to close out the rest of the season for Marquette. A tough loss to a very talented North Carolina team in round one of the Big Dance.
Yeah, it was a disappointing loss. End of a great season, surpassed all expectations, 9 new players, and even the 3 players that returned from last year, Justin Lewis, Greg Elliott, and Osei Gadaro. They had been hurt the year before. They're in new roles. It was an amazing coaching job by Shock and his staff. And you have to be lucky also in the NCAA. And for an 8th seed, North Carolina, right now they're playing as a 1 seed. They're playing incredibly well.
Just ask Baylor, huh?
Just ask Baylor. And over the last 3 times Marquette has made the tournament, they played a South Carolina team that went to the Final Four. Then they played Ja Morant and Murray State, and now this, which is too bad. So, but it's not going to take away from a very good season.
Yeah, absolutely. And the future is so bright with Shaka Smart. You got to believe that he will build, and hopefully the Big Dance will be something that happens on a regular basis for the Golden Eagles.
That's right. Yeah, they have a really nice recruiting class coming in. We'll be talking about that in the future. Interesting player, Ben Gold from Australia. That's an interesting player to watch. Very intriguing player. Steve Novak outside shooting skills, and kind of reminds you of a poor man's Chet Holmgren from Gonzaga inside. See how he fits in with Chase Ross, looks like a Jimmy Butler type left-handed player. Kind of like a Cam Jones, but he has more lift to finish than Cam does at this point in his career. And then the little point guard, the 5'10" point guard, Sean Jones from Columbus, Ohio. So
you may get some play time right away.
And there's the portal, so you never know. You never know who's going to leave, who's going to stay. Is Justin Lewis going to leave? Is Justin Lewis going to hone his game for another year and build some maybe self-confidence? Or you never know. Does his family need the money? Is he going to be a first-round pick? Well, then he might have to go. So we'll see what happens. But I remember Shaka saying when he took over, it's a new world in college basketball with the transfer portal. So you recruit 13 players every year because you never know what 2 or 3 are going to leave.
We like to think the future will be great for Marquette University basketball, but we also look past, and we think of Al McGuire. And John, again, you brought in a tremendous guest in John Carey, a former manager for the team in some incredible years back there in '69 through '73, the executive director of the MAC Fund for so many years. Great guy.
Yeah, I have to give props to my wife Sheila for reminding me of this. While we're setting this show up, we want to acknowledge the heritage and traditions of Marquette basketball and archive it with the people who were there at the time. That's really the objective of the show. And we're worried about sponsors, we're worried about production, we're worried about all these different things. And so Sheila reminded me, don't forget about John Carey. Sheila works at Children's Hospital as a social worker in the cancer ward. And she said, John, you work with John Carey, as you said, the executive director of the MAC Fund. So John probably was at Marquette basketball of the 104 years of Marquette basketball, the best 4-year run was from 1969 to 1973. The best players, the best coaches, the best games, the craziest activity on and off the court.
Yeah, some of the best stories.
Some of the best stories.
We're about to get them, too.
They're right in that wheelhouse, and it was great to have John to come here and talk about it.
What do you say we get right to John Carey? He's brought to you by Moonlight Graham Modern Dental Benefits. Moonlight Graham, a proud sponsor of Marquette University basketball and the Marquette Hoop Show. John Carey is a treasure, not only because of what he did for the MAC Fund and the way he lives out his faith, but he was up close and personal with Al McGuire as a manager on the team. Was it 69 through 73, JC?
Yep.
Boy, tell us all about it. What was it like to be that close to the late and legendary Al McGuire?
How long is the show? I was just so lucky. I went to high school with Allie at Marquette High, and so we were exposed a little bit to Coach, but I think he came to one high school game. We lost to Don Bosco. Gary Sager hit a shot at Pius High School, and he came in the locker room, and I'll never forget, it was the first time I had met him. And he said, "Hey guys, it's not that bad." And Pat Cannon was this fiery guard we had on our team, and he goes, "Yeah, well, how would you feel if you went out of the tournament?" I was like, "Who said that to Al McGuire?" But Coach was just something else. He was. There just isn't enough time. There aren't enough stories. The thing was, everyone talks about that. He didn't pay a lot of attention during practice and things like that, which was somewhat exaggerated, but. Hank was always the X's and O's, and Coach Raymond's was, you talk about a prince of a man. Yes. But I'll tell you, when that ball went up and that game started, I'm not sure there's ever been a better game coach than Al McGuire. He just had a feel. He just had such a sense for everything, and he was like a ringmaster. I always felt we were sort of like a circus. Going on the road, and he was the ringmaster, and wherever we went, we were the story. I mean, we were never out of the top 10 in 4 years, and believe it or not, in 4 years we lost 10 games. Imagine that, and it was Hank and him. There were now there's more assistants than there are players, and it was those two, and then Rick came, I think my junior year, Rick Majerus, and. It was just amazing. And Al would have his bird dogs out in different parts of the country. Tommy Brennan down south in North Carolina, and Mickey, I can't remember his last name, in New York. And they would, quote unquote, scout people. And, if Al wanted them and went after them, I can't imagine him saying no. And he brought in some great guys, and we had some good local guys as well. And it was just amazing. I mean, I was so lucky, to do. I mean, I sat for 3 years. I sat next to Hank Raymond's and Al McGuire, and that's why people say to me now, "Well, why don't you go to a lot of games?" I'm going. When you sit courtside next to Hank Raymond's and Al McGuire, I mean, seriously, it's different. I was just lucky, and. But he was just off the charts. And he was so nice. He kept me involved. He asked me to help produce the Al's Run. First time they went down to Summerfest, and then Bob Doucette was a great guy at Milwaukee Insurance, and they did a roast of Al McGuire, and Coach asked me to produce that. And Mary would always say, "Do you get paid for any of this?" I'd say, "No." But I mean, just the fact that Coach would do that, and I was lucky. I got to see him 14 hours before he died. When he went into the hospice, I wrote him a note every week. I wouldn't go see him because I was afraid that I wasn't high enough on the chart to get in, so to speak. And I thought if he would reject me, I'd be on a psychiatrist's couch the rest of my life. So I stayed away. And shortly before he died, Brian Brunkhorst, who was close to Coach, great player at Marquette, said, "Al's got something he wants me to give you." And so I said, "I'll pick it up." He said, "I'm right by your office." So I dropped off, and it was like a 3/4 size cutout of him in a Carhartt jacket with a farmer's hat. It was a Nike one. And you may remember it was a great Nike commercial with Dean Smith and John Thompson and Al. And they were sitting on a porch and that. And so I said, "Well, I'll write him a note." He said, "Write it real soon, Johnny." So the next day I took it out to the hospice. And I said, "Can you give this to Al McGuire?" Now, I had protected myself for 6 months. And she said, "Well, just take it down yourself." I said, No. I said, "Just please give it to him." So they said, "No, go down." So I go down, and somebody calls the name John, and why would they be calling me? I just kept walking. Turns out it was the head nurse, who was a sister, a religious sister, who was the aunt of one of our Mac Fund kids, who had passed, I was real close to. And she said, just go in. She said, he won't respond, but he'll hear you. So I walked in the room, and he was laying down, and I said, Coach, it's Johnny. And he got up, and I thought he was going to say, get out of here.
Yeah.
And then he laid back down, and I said, I just want you to know how much I love you, how much we all loved you, and how about if we say a prayer? So I said the Our Father. And walked out at noon, and he died at like 2 in the morning the next day. And when Allie gave the eulogy, which was a wonderful eulogy, he said Dad never wanted anyone to see him laying down. He either wanted to be sitting up or standing. And just real quickly, there's a great story. He said, Dad, you want to go to confession? And Allie said, I can get you a priest from Marquette. He goes, oh, no, Father John here, it will be fine. I'll go on him. And so he comes out of confession, and Allie said, how did it go? And he goes, Father John here's a lot better than I thought he did. And that was, frankly, that was Al McGuire. The other thing that Allie said at the eulogy was, he said, call the athletic director, call Pat Richter, and tell him to take me off the short list for Wisconsin. But I don't know. He was so nice to me, but I remember at his funeral at Jesu, I walked this old woman down the steps. Some might call her a street woman. I don't know if she was. She was lovely, and she looked at me and she said, he was always kind to me. Mm-hmm. He'd always see me and always be kind. And he used to tell us, he'd say, always be nice to everybody and always get to know the janitors and the secretaries, because they know more than anyone. Mm-hmm. And they want to know, if you want to know what's going on, ask them. And, he was something else. I mean, I was the infamous 1970, we turned down the NCAA tournament.
Who does that, right? And they changed the rule because, right, you have to tell the backdrop there. Right?
I mean, I was a freshman, and I can't believe I did this. I walked into his office like at 2:30. It was a Tuesday. Back then, it wasn't like it is now. There were only 32 teams. And, we should have got a bid to the Mid-East, I guess. And so I walked in the office. I said, hey, Coach, did we get a bid? And he goes, yeah, we got a bid to the Midwest. I said, oh, great. He goes, you stupid. And then there was a word. And he said, I want everybody in the locker room in 20 minutes or a half hour. And so we got everybody I don't know how, we got everybody in the locker room. And he said that blankety blank Golden Dome got our bid. It was Notre Dame. We had lost to them. I think we ought to tell them where they can stick their bid, and we go to New York. And we'll win the NIT. And the players were all like, he goes, if we go to, I'm thinking Lawrence, Kansas. Some people said it was Manhattan. But he said, we go there and we lose. Nobody sees Jeff, who was Jeff Sewell, who ended up playing for what's now Golden State. Nobody sees Joe, who was Joe Thomas, who ended up playing for Atlanta. And nobody sees Dean, who a year later, I think he went to New York initially.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, anyways, so we went. And I didn't go. I was only a freshman, so I didn't make the trip. We're playing this team from Massachusetts, and we're getting killed initially, like killed. And this guy's just killing us. And Al's going, what's going on? What's going on? And Hank goes, I tried to tell you. You never listen to me. You never listen to me. They're like these two old ladies. And it was Julius Erving.
Oh, yes.
Dr. J. Before it was called UMass.
Yes.
It was,
Yes.
And then they played, I don't, it was just, we ended up winning. So what was it about him? It was just the total package. I remember he'd get a car. He's the only guy I know that had 2 car deals. He had a car deal with Pontiac, and he had a car deal with Ford. Now, who can do that?
Exactly.
But that's what it was. So one day he said to me, he said, Johnny, you got to drive me over. I got to get a new car. I got a Heiser Ford Red Andrews on Prospect. I said, God, that must be so great to get a new car like that. And he looks at me and he goes, yeah. I said, Coach, I remember when you dropped Allie off at Marquette High with a white Comet. And he looked at me and he said, Sunshine, don't ever forget where you came from. He used to call me Sunshine. You know, he called me, actually he was always nice to me. It was just that kind of thing. You know, it's like, you know, it doesn't do you any good to give away a loaf of bread unless you have 2 loaves, 1 on each arm. Because if you give away the one and you don't take care of yourself, and he'd say, you got to save yourself before you save the world. Yeah. And you think how many people are out there trying to help others and they're screwed up themselves. Yeah. Yeah. My poor wife, she's had to hear these stories. But I remember when we did, I mentioned the roast, and we did a VIP thing.
Was that the PAC?
No, it was at the Pfister.
Pfister. Okay.
And it was, I mean, Digger came in, Billy Packer came in, Enberg was there. Kevin Byrne he's still with the Ravens. It was a great thing. Charlie Hansen was the MC. Jerry Savio, who was like one of Coach's best friends, and the thing was over, and there was a VIP thing, which people pay extra to meet him. And I knew he had no desire to be at the VIP thing. I had graduated about 6 years earlier, and I said, "Do you want to get out of here?" And he goes, "Yeah." Mary was with me. I said, well, just follow me. So we got him out. Took him down to my car. It was probably a Volkswagen back then. I think it was a Volkswagen. And drove him to his car. So we were in the car together maybe 5 minutes. Now he got out of the car and Mary goes, I get it. I said, what do you mean? She goes, I never understood why everyone would say what they'd say about him and the way you would talk. She said, John, the magnetism coming from him, and that's what it was. You know, I never met anybody like him. We would be in the locker room before the games, and everybody would go out, and it would be me and him, or he and I, whatever English I'm supposed to say. We'd walk out, and he'd be quiet, and we'd get to the curtains in the arena, and he'd go like this, he'd tie his tie, and he'd put his shoulders back, and he'd walk out, and he'd look around the 4 corners. And if the 4 corners were full, quote, I did my job. Right. And I was always, he never said, Johnny, I want you to do this. We just, you know, I knew what he wanted, and I would always be there, and not that I had anything to do with anything, but it was a routine, and he liked it. He's a little scatterbrained, and he'd say, Johnny, call your dad and have him bring down a brown belt for me. I forgot a belt. So I'd call my dad, who was this fastidious general practitioner doctor who took great pride in the way he dressed. He goes, you mean he didn't? I said, Dad, just please bring a belt. So he'd bring a belt. And one time he goes, Johnny, call your dad and have him bring some shave cream and a razor. Don't tell me he didn't shave. I said, well, I won't tell you, Dad, but he didn't. And no one knows those things. I mean, it's probably the first time I've ever said it. But he was great. You know, he was so respectful. I mean, think about when Jimmy went pro. I think it was February 8th.
Jones, huh?
Yeah, Jimmy Jones, February 18th, 1972. It was called a hardship case at the time. And Spencer Haywood, prior year, was at Detroit, and he did it. And Jimmy went pro. Legend has it that the deal was cut on, I think, January 6th, 1972. We played South Carolina. Great game, national TV game, which on Sundays, in those days, that wasn't that common. Tom Riker and Bob Lackey got into a fight, big fight. We ended up winning the game. It was Frank McGuire versus Al McGuire, South Carolina versus Marquette. So we were going to Reno, and we stayed overnight in Dallas. And we're going, why are we staying over? Because we flew commercial. Why are we staying overnight in Dallas? And the legend has it that Lou Carnesecca, who was the general manager of the New York Nets and was Al's friend and all that, he and Jimmy and Al met. This is the story. I'm not saying it's true, but I've heard it from a number of people. And that was the start of the deal. And everybody couldn't understand why Al let Jimmy go, and Al had the classic line that's been repeated a number of times. I looked in his refrigerator, and I looked in my refrigerator, and mine had a lot more. But that's how Al was. You know, he always wanted the guys to finish their degree, and you know, he was respectful with classes and things of that nature. He was respectful of everybody, which was sort of amazing when you think that he did that. He did the turning down the NCAA I don't think Father Rayner ever was asked. I don't think Sam Saucedo, who was the athletic director, was asked. Seriously.
All right. Well, I agree.
I mean, I mentioned the South Carolina game.
The uniforms.
This is classic. This is just a classic story. So we're in the locker room before the game, and we've got these new uniforms with these, real cool stripes down the side. Nobody had anything. We had the bumblebees and
Aqua blue,
all that
yeah.
stuff. They were TV colors. They were
Right.
literally made for TV because of the lights and everything else. So we're in the locker room before, and the announcer comes in, or color guy probably, and goes, well, to Dr. Saucedo, Sam Saucedo, wonderful, wonderful man. He said, well, you must really be excited to be introducing your new uniforms today. And Sam goes, what? And Al goes, Sammy, didn't I tell you about that? Well, we were at DePaul, at Alumni Hall at DePaul. Ray Meyer, well, what a prince of a guy he was. And Hot Rod Hundley was used to be called Hughes Sports Network. It was sort of a precursor.
Remember that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And Hot Rod wanted to interview Al, or Coach. I always call him Coach. And so I said, Coach, he wants to interview you. And he said, write this down. Marquette's wearing uniforms made by Sand Knit Industries of Medalist Industries. Tell him if he reads that once each half, I'll do the interview. Now, I'm this 5'5" guy. I look like I'm like 12 years old, and I'm going to tell Hot Rod this. And he looks at me and he goes, I can't do that. I said, no problem, and you won't do the interview. And he looked at me. I said, I'm not kidding. I said, he won't do it. And I said, and if you think you're going to get away with it, I said, he'll watch the tape afterwards. And Hot Rod was like, and he did the interview,
Yeah.
and Hot Rod did it.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's how he was. He was so, he was just, it was just different, there aren't enough words. I didn't need another father. I had a wonderful, wonderful dad and mom. But he was like a second father. I mean, he sort of taught you street smarts. Like, I'm a kid from Bayview, and what do I know about street smarts? And but when you were around him, it sort of like rubbed off.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of like if you act like you're supposed to be there, nobody stops you.
Mm-hmm.
And he taught us that. And I've mastered it in the last 50 years of everything. But he's just, we had some great teams. If Jimmy hadn't gone pro, our front line would have been Jim Jones, who went pro and played quite a while, Larry McNeil, who went to, at that time, Kansas City, and Maurice Lucas, who, Bill Walton named his son Luke after Maurice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would have been our front line, senior year. I mean, imagine that. With Allie in the backcourt, and I think George Frazier was the other guard.
Shaka Smart would take that group, huh?
Anybody would have. And the thing is, when wherever we would go, practices would be open, and it would be like the circus coming to town. But I mean, imagine, like, you're John was a huge basketball, not only player, but fan, and obviously, Tommy, what you've done. Imagine being a kid at some school like, I don't know, UTEP, University of Texas El Paso, having Marquette come. We were at UTEP, and there was this guy there. He was 19. We were there in '72, and there was this guy there, and Coach never introduced us. And there was a fight. Two of our guys got in a fight, which wasn't uncommon, and stopped the fight, and it ended. And this guy says to Al, "Well, what are you going to do about that?" He goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, you got to do something." He goes, "Yeah, you're right. That's it, guys. Practice is over. We're going to Juarez." Well, the guy happened to be Donnie Haskins, who took Texas Western. I was going to say Christian, but Texas Western to the title.
Yes.
First black team.
That's right. Beat Kentucky, right?
Beat Kentucky. Now, any other guy would have said, "Hey, guys, I want you to meet this guy. He broke the color barrier," and all. Al was like, "So?" And I said, "Coach, do you want to introduce him?" And he goes, "Oh, that's Donnie." And Hoskins was like, I'm sure he was like, "You are crazy." But, wherever we went, we played at Long Beach State. Lute Olson was the coach. And this guy was doing the broadcast. It was a late night game on the East Coast, which, you know, again, it wasn't like it is now. There wasn't basketball all the time. And there was this announcer, and Al said he's going to become one of the best in the country. And he was this little known guy named Dick Enberg, you know, and he just had it, you know. He was great. But you can't say enough about Coach Raymond's, and there were so many good people. And Father Rayner was really, really good. He was a president, and he just let him alone. You know, I mean, 'cause how are you gonna corral? Well, back when the Bucks came, the Bucks wanted to hire him, and Father Macaulay was, I think, the head of the athletic board or something like that. And he said, "I'll let him go someplace else, but I'm not going to let him go where we compete against him." You know, it was a smart move. Yeah. And I think that Coach probably didn't like that. And then his line was, "I'll only coach in the pros if I get $1 more than
The highest paid guy.
than the highest paid guy."
Yeah.
You know, but he had such a way. It was '72. We were playing at Detroit, and there was a lot of black-white issues back then, and unfortunately, there still are. But Bobby Lackey was our captain, and it's like 5 minutes before the start of the game, and I was always by Coach, and he says, Bobby, come over here." And so Bobby comes over and he goes, "Hey, Bobby, hey, when you and the brothers on Detroit, when you want to do that sit-down strike, because you're so abused at Marquette, I feel so bad for you the way you're treated. You get treated so badly. You just let me know and I'll call timeout." And Bobby just looked at him, smiled, and walked away. Bobby goes over to his counterpart on Detroit, and Bobby's dead. He's up watching us, and I can hear to this day, "The man knows everything. The man knows everything." And there was no sit-down strike. Well, fast forward maybe 20, 25 years, Rutgers stopped the game during the game, literally postponed it, and then they had to go into a meeting to decide what to do. Al McGuire didn't decide what to do. He just said, "Just let me know, I'll call timeout for you." And it totally diffused everything. And that's the way he was. He just, he had a sense, at least in my eyes, and I'm not objective when it comes to him. I'd be the first to tell you that. But he was just very special.
Boy, John Kerry had the catbird seat right next to the late legendary Al McGuire, and equally so the marvelous assistant Hank Raymonds. That was really fun.
It was, and we're going to have him back again, no question, because we only touched on maybe 1% of the questions that we had, but that's a great year to look back on, and always want to hear more stories.
John Kerry again, brought to you by Moonlight Graham, our proud sponsor, Modern Dental Benefits, the Marquette Hoops basketball show, and we appreciate them so much, and all of you, everybody. And for John Dodds and our producer, Jason Ruck, I'm Tom Pippins. We'll see you next time on My 24. Go Marquette, and God bless.